Welcome to Transcendent. I'm Joe and I'm the dad.
And I'm Raya, and I'm the daughter.
We have another interesting guest for us today, and we can't wait to share her with you because we think she's got a lot of exciting things to tell us. And I know I'm always interested in hearing unique stories. So we're going to introduce you to another unique person.
I'm not quite sure what to call you, but I'm going to call you my niece-in-law.
There you go.
I think that works. We're speaking with Heather, who is recently out of college. You're going for your marketing right now, then, right? You're going back to college for your marketing, but recent college graduate. One of our close family members who is also transgender. Heather, welcome here with us, and thank you so much for agreeing to come on and share your story.
Thank you so much. I've been listening to y'all's podcast for a while, and I've been very interested in hoping to appear soon and share my story with everyone on the podcast as well.
That's great. One of the biggest differences that I've noticed between myself and many, many other trans people is, for me, I was one day presenting as a man completely and one day presenting completely female. My transition was very, very quick. You took a little more time though.
I guess for me, I didn't really know what transgender was for a long time until I watched this show called Ugly Betty. And they introduced a transgender character. It was one of the main characters' brother, now sister. And then that's like the first time I caught a glimpse of what it meant to be transgender. It wasn't, full on drag, or it wasn't a show. It could be someone's life. And they made her character pretty well, besides a few scenes. It was in the 2000s where trans, jokes were pretty prominent and a little offensive sometimes, but I still really enjoyed the show. But seeing that in high school is when I started to understand what it meant to be trans. And for me, I was always androgynous growing up. My hair was always long. I stuck with clothes that generally could be viewed both genders, and I didn't really notice it at the time, but it just made me more comfortable. Growing up, I was always insecure about my body a lot too. I feel like that just comes with being transgender. Yeah, I started to explore more of my transgenderness when I moved away to college in a different city without family. And I had went to a Super Smash Brothers tournament, which was, very nerdy and it was very fun though. But when I went, I was not out yet. I was about 19 years old, I believe, or 18. And I was wearing my androgynous clothing. And when I got there, everyone referred to me as she. And I had never met these people in my life. The first time I ever went, and everyone was already introducing me as she. It was so nice to be seen without having to say anything. That was the first time I've ever felt something that genuine from anyone. But yeah, and then when they started referring to me to other players, people that were at the tournament, they were using my gamer tag that you write down, which is Otakunaut. So it wasn't my name, because I was dead naming myself. The whole time I would introduce myself, I was dead naming. So everyone was introducing me with my gamer tag. And I thought that was so awesome because, they're being gender neutral with just using my gamer tag without me having to say anything.
Without having already transitioned, and these people referring to you as she, did that make you feel more or less comfortable at the time?
I was actually very happy when, they introduced me like that. Again, I wasn't even out yet, but I knew. I had always known.
When did you really think that that was the case, or has it grown up with you for as long as you know?
Or let me ask it from my perspective as someone that has gone through, because I think that it can be a misleading question to ask, when did you know? But maybe more, what did you know? What did you feel? What was your experience like growing up? And what did you feel when?
Growing up, I feel like a lot of trans people go through this, especially at least my age, but I grew up playing a lot of video games as a kid or watching cartoons, right? So I vividly remember playing like Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, all those stuff. And I would always pick the girl characters. And it wasn't that I don't know. I remember growing up remembering like, do I just like them? Do I think they're pretty? Which, I mean, I did. They're very gorgeous girls, but I was mostly leaning to that. I wanted to be them. Like, I didn't know at the time, but these characters I was picking in a simple video game is something I wanted to be. And, I didn't know that that was a thing, but yeah, I also was able to see that in different other places. When I would watch cartoons, I used to watch Teen Titans on Cartoon Network. It was one of my comfort shows. After school, I related to Starfire. Like, she's one of the characters that I wanted to be so bad. I know people say Raven, but both of them are amazing characters.
I like
But that's
Starfire. Yeah, she's pretty cool.
she's cool. And I maybe because she was the more feminine one that I felt like I needed to be her because I was missing that femininity, I guess, a little bit. So like her being more feminine, I was drawn a little bit more to that.
Ryan, in an earlier podcast, you said the same thing. You talked about identifying more with Wonder Woman than you did with Superman. And I thought that was interesting. You talked about the cartoon characters. And it's interesting that I hear that same story from Heather.
I think there might be something related to the fantasy element of watching a show that is not real, that you can identify with the characters in a way that maybe is harder to come to in real life. Heather, I'm curious then, as much as you're comfortable talking about it, for you then, how did that work together with orientation? How do you consider yourself right now? Who in general are you attracted to? And how has that worked together with either like at cross purposes with your transition or together with your transition?
Growing up, I was always attracted to men. I'm not attracted to women, but I can definitely tell when a woman's beautiful. I will compliment her all the way. I'll say something if she's pretty, right? But no, I've been always attracted to men, especially like going back to the cartoon thing. There's characters I was drawn to, or even on TV shows. It wasn't really synonymous with me being trans. When I'm post transitioning, I'm still attracted to men. So that's where I came from. I was always attracted to men.
When did you finally decide to transition, or what was your process where you finally came out?
So I came out when I was 19 to my parents. And it was very hard, even growing up in a very, I guess you can almost say liberal family, but everyone was very understanding and sympathetic, empathetic with everything. So I always felt comfortable, but I was always still very nervous. Like I was very nervous about the whole thing. But I finally came out to my parents after I came back from college, is where I was living. And I had shared that story where people were referring to me as a woman and a girl and all this stuff, treating me a little different than they were treating me in my hometown. So that's when I started feeling very comfortable with using the female and girl pronouns. So I felt like that's when I needed to finally come out and tell my parents that this is what I'm comfortable with.
Did you have any pushback from any of your relation at all or any of your friends? Did you find that you lost any friends or were they all pretty much accepting or, oh yeah, I already knew that? Well, I mean, how was the reaction?
It was definitely a little bit of both. My friend group, I always surrounded myself with the nicest people. I always try to. I will never associate with people who are that judge or are rude to anyone like that. But all my friends were basically either like, oh, I knew, or oh, I should have known. But everyone was pretty supportive. But I will say when I came out to my parents, it was actually not a good one. There was definitely some pushback from my mom. I will say now though, she's my biggest supporter. She's done so much for me. She's helped me so much. She's helped me seek mental health and helped me set up my hormones. But same with my stepdad. It was not a very good coming out story. She, I don't mean to say anything bad, but she did say that I would never be a pretty woman. Like she did say, like, it makes no sense. Like you would never be a pretty girl. And that was like the first thing she actually said in response to what I said, saying that I'm transgender.
And our audience cannot see you right now because we are just audio, but Heather is gorgeous. Like,
Yes.
yeah, I'm kind of jealous.
You can tell your mother that I think she got that wrong
To
big time.
be fair, I look like her. She's gorgeous. She's a gorgeous woman. I get all my stuff from her.
Uh-huh.
And I
But
think that says something though, because I mean, I think that she is a very good person with a very good heart. And yet, when we're not prepared, I think any of us, our gut reaction is always potentially hurtful. And so that's part of the reason why we do this podcast is I think even the best of us can end up saying the wrong things, doing the wrong things. I know I, even in my transition, when I have talked to other trans people, I've said things and asked things that they've looked at me and said, that's really not appropriate. And I'm trans myself. Like, I should know that that's not appropriate. So we can all do things. And I think in some ways that's liberating that I mean, I'm sad that you had to go through that and had to have that experience, but I'm really glad to know that she came around and made things right and that now you have a very good relationship.
yeah, we had to go through that hard thing. I mean, I always try to look in her perspective. I think for her, it felt like she was losing her son.
Oh,
She,
shit.
yeah, it wasn't like, it was a hard thing to let go of, especially immediately hearing it. And for her, she said that it came out of very like left field. Like she thought I was maybe just gay or bi, but I feel like being transgender is so different in a way. It's not just an orientation, it's who you are. It's a whole different experience than being gay or bi. But so I feel like in her mind, she was just losing the son that she grew up with.
I can identify with that because I had the same situation.
Mm.
And I can tell you now, we were very close as father and son. We're very close and we worked together well. I wrote a song about my best friend and we did a lot of things together. And now I will tell you we're even closer. It's wonderful how close we are. I can't tell you how proud I am of her. Your mother probably feels the same way.
She definitely does. And that was beautiful what you just said.
I think for us too, Dad, is the authenticity that now you get to know me as the me that I really am. And Heather, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the changes for you as you got to be more authentically who you are, as you discovered, because it's not like it's you know it beforehand, you're sort of in a discovery process, and just how your life has changed as you've been able to live more authentically.
Um, I guess I should say this just to get out of the way, but the easiest thing and the most known thing that most trans people do is that it's so liberating. You're not having to hide anything or be someone you're not. Society tells you to act this way, be this way, depending on your gender. It's so constrictive. So, for example, a simple thing like clothing, I've always been drawn to female clothing and I was never able to wear it. I mean, I guess I could have, but there would have been societal backlash if I did, right? At least when I was a man. But living life as a woman, I've been able to go to places without the strange looks. I can go to a makeup store and be like every other girl, living their dream, trying to feel pretty or do whatever that makes them happy. I love the makeup stores. I've been trying to practice more with makeup. Okay. I still don't wear too much because I'm not the best with it, but the simple things, the mascara, the eyeshadow, the eyeliner, it's all, a fun part.
It is fun for sure. Yeah, it's fun because you get to play and you discover like, wow. And I'm kind of in the same place. I almost feel like if you do too much makeup as a trans person, it outs you more. And
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
so you have to sort of pull it back a little bit. Were there any particular pieces of clothing that you were like really looking forward to being able to wear when you transitioned?
I always liked characters that had like tank tops whenever I'd watch shows, but I'm still not to get too personal, but I'm what 3.5 years in the hormones now, and I only have a B cup right now for my boobs, but I hope to fill out a bit more and wear stuff like that, not to be provocative in any way, but just to feel pretty for myself. And it's something I always wanted to wear. I do like very cutesy clothing too. Like, I feel like now a lot of people my age will know like horror character clothing, like from PS2 games. The type of clothing they would wear in those games is something I want to wear. So I'm still trying to develop my style like that.
Many of the people who are transgender could feel really hurt if someone uses their dead name.
I feel like I have a different perspective on it. I've come to terms with being a trans girl, and I lived a whole life of 18 years of being, I don't want to dead name myself because, that's a topic, but I don't mind if people use my old name and referring back then. I would prefer if they used Heather and used she, her pronouns, but depending on the situation, maybe my gender does make sense for the story. I would prefer not, just because it makes me a little dysphoric sometimes, knowing that I did live that life and I'm trying so hard to get away from it. But I won't deny anything I went through. Because like I did say, it is 18 years of living as a man. So
Do you feel like you have any problem talking about being trans? I'm asking because outside of this podcast and very limited scenarios, I don't ever disclose that I'm trans. I don't disclose at work. I don't disclose in my daily life. There are a lot of people that I think would be very surprised to find out. Are you a bit more open or are you similar that you generally just don't talk about it?
I generally will never talk about me being transgender because of safety reasons. I was raised in a very like liberal area. This is kind of more mixed. So I'll hear conversations about people talking about trans people all the time. And I work as a waitress at the moment. So I hear a lot of different conversations. So for my own safety, I won't disclose it to random people. But if we're very close friends and, or even coworkers, for example, I've had coworkers ask me for a tampon and it becomes very awkward because then, they'll ask my other coworkers and be like, oh, people talk and sometimes they'll disclose that I'm trans to them, to these new people that don't know me, which I think is fine because generally they're really nice. But I'd prefer if I didn't really talk about being transgender unless we are really getting to know each other or we were dating or something like that.
And for our audience, we should just clarify that, well, you and I would be okay if somebody that knows discloses because that's the kind of people that we are. I want to make sure that the audience recognizes that it's not okay to out somebody without their consent or without their permission. And that's a really important thing.
Yeah, for sure. Especially going back to what I said about the safety reasons for it. We see so many people that go through very bad things for simply living their authentic self.
Did you do a lot of learning as you transitioned? Did you discover that there were a lot of things that you had to learn, or did you sort of naturally come into things? I commented right away when we got on the Zoom meeting at how amazing I think your voice is. And I've had others comment for me, and I think maybe this is just the nature of being human that we look at one another and we say, wow. And especially for trans people, we all look at one another and say, oh my gosh, I love how well you're doing with your voice, and I love how passing you are, and you're so gorgeous, and like this is just something that we do. So I'm curious, what kind of work have you put in?
For me, I feel like I always kind of had a softer voice anyways, but I feel like I definitely have grown into it a bit more. I definitely used to go on YouTube and have like voice training 101, transgender tips or something like that. And it is kind of funny to, say that I did go through that stage, but I guess with passing being such a huge thing, my first like year, I tried my best to pass no matter what it was. If it was wearing mascara every single day, wearing eyeliner every single day, I didn't really fit women's clothing the best either. So I would wear big t-shirts, or I still do even now. But it was a lot of learning to do. I even go on Reddit sometimes and on the trans forum, people always just post pictures of being like, oh, how do I look in this? Does this make me look more of a woman? Or can I have tips, please? And It's kind of sad to see sometimes, especially in the whole trans community where it's supposed to be a safe place, that passing is such a huge thing. I wish it wasn't, but society's so genderfied that it needs to be, I guess.
What is one thing you had a difficult time learning as a woman?
I feel like maybe handling situations a little differently. I feel like as a woman, I have to immediately be sympathetic with everything, even if I don't agree with it. Or I work a food service job, I'm a waitress. So even with that job, I have to be different than when I was before. I felt like I could be more assertive back then and get away with it as a man. But if I did that now, I would come off as very rude, like, oh, she needs to smile more, or she's, this and this and this. So I feel like when I approach situations, I had to immediately be kinder. If not, I'm perceived a lot different than when I was a man.
If there's somebody out there right now listening to us that wonders about, oh, what should I do next? How should I feel? Those kinds of things. They don't know whether they should come out or not. And I'm listening to this because I want answers. What would you tell them?
I'm glad that you're allowing yourself to feel those emotions because the human mind is so expansive. And the fact that you're already listening to those feelings is already a huge step rather than denying. I guess I would tell them to do what I did and maybe seek mental, like a therapist to see if everything's right for you. And if you're not completely sure, because I will say being trans is a huge thing. You have to be careful of what you're wanting to do and if it's right for you. That's my take on it.
When you mentioned earlier that when you first came out, the first person you told was your parents. And that you also said was probably the hardest thing. After that, it was easier. Would you recommend that be the case with everyone? Suppose there's someone out there, for example, Raya and I met someone who was very concerned about what the parents thought, and that was the hurdle to keeping them from coming out. What would you tell people like that?
I would
Is it
say
is it best to go to the most difficult situation first?
definitely not. I will say that is not the first thing to do is tell your parents. Sometimes the best things could be to tell your best friend that you've known forever that probably know you better than your parents do. But I guess especially if you're younger and you're planning on coming out, you have to make sure you're in a safe environment. Um, Even with your parents, you don't know if they're going to kick you out for being trans or gay or whatever the case is. Because I did read a study not too long ago that a lot of homeless youth are LGBTQ.
Mhm.
And that's such a sad statistic to read because I was blessed with a family that was welcoming, even though they weren't in the beginning. At least they came around. Not everyone has that privilege to have that safe haven with their parents.
It is critical. Statistics show that 55% of the people who are rejected by just one parent consider suicide, and 11% of those people actually attempt it. That's a very high number, and it is critical. And we all want to keep that relationship. You want to preserve what you have. Sometimes it doesn't come out right away, like it did with you, like it did with me. I didn't say anything when Raya came out. I just thought either I accept it or I lose her. And I wasn't going to lose her. And so that was the step forward to beginning to develop the new relationship. And I'm so glad I did.
And that's beautiful. I wish that every LGBTQ member would have the same experience like Ryan and I did, where we could be safe and comforted in such a hard time. But not everyone's blessed with that.
If you had one thing that you would like to leave our audience with, one message, what would you like to make sure that everybody knows?
I know this may seem basic to say, but having basic empathy for everyone or sympathy, I should say, goes such a long way. Like, you never know what people are going through. And I know it gets said time and time again, but that's because it's so important. Like, I struggled with mental health as well growing up. Not to get too deep, but I used to pray to God to wake up differently every morning when I was like 5 to maybe 10 years old. I used to pray every day that it would change. And I wasn't praying to die, but I was praying, to change genders like magic, But I would say just be as sympathetic as you can to everyone and just try to be a listener, a good listener too, and try to learn and educate yourself on topics that you wish to know more of.
That's really good. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us and being here with us and just putting yourself out there to let people hear your story. It's courageous to have you here, and I'm just really grateful. I'm grateful for our relationship with you and to be able to know you. You are such a neat person, and it's just really, really good to have you here.
And it's great to have you here listening to us as well. And if you enjoy this, please share it with someone else. And also, we look forward to seeing you again next Monday.